New Orleans, a city of mystery, a city that 1 million people proudly call home, at least the ones above ground, because New Orleans is also home to many beings that can't find their way back. Watch as our group of paranormal investigators attempt to discover these lost souls. Join us as we explore New Orleans, the most haunted city in America. On this episode, we'll venture into our legendary Cities of the Dead. We'll visit St. Louis Cemetery No. 1, the city's oldest burial ground, and visit the tomb of voodoo queen Marie Laveau. Then, we'll go across town and visit Metairie Cemetery and the tomb of the infamous Storyville Madam, Josie Arlington. We'll take a look at some of the dangers one can encounter while hunting ghosts on sacred burial grounds.
I'd like to talk a little bit about why we call our cemeteries the Cities of the Dead and give you a little information about our burial practices. We call them the Cities of the Dead because they are literally like little cities. They have little streets that wind through them. They are above ground and they resemble people's homes in a lot of ways. As a matter of fact, you could say that these wall vaults resemble apartment buildings and our freestanding family tombs resemble people's homes. Here in New Orleans, we do bury the dead mostly above ground. There are a lot of reasons for this. One is very European tradition of burying above ground. A lot of the Spanish settlements in the Caribbean and other tropical regions have things like the wall vaults. You'll see these. And it makes sense for us to have them here. Also because we do have a high water table, this simply makes sense. A lot of the other influences in our cemeteries do, however, come from a very famous cemetery in Paris called Père Lachaise. It has beautiful above-ground monuments, albeit above mostly below-ground burial, but the architecture of our cemeteries has been directly influenced by that in Père Lachaise. A few other reasons are that we want to be able to visit the dead and enjoy visiting the dead, and it's a lot more pleasant and aesthetic to do that here when it's above ground. How do these tombs differ from other burial practices? If you look at this wall vault, you might think to yourself, well, that resembles a mausoleum. But mausoleums in other parts of the United States are used for one burial each. We have multiple use out of the vaults and also of the tombs, which is unique. Now, if we have a wall vault, today we generally just own one. In the past in here, however, you had the option, if need be, of renting one. Now, why on earth would you be doing that? It's simple. We had a custom here, and it was just custom. It was not law. It was custom that when you were entombed, you were not disturbed for at least 1 year and 1 day. So if you lost another family member during that time, you would rent another vault until such time as those remains could be moved to join the rest of your dearly departed. Now, when we change out the burials, they will remove the casket from the last burial. Most caskets sold in New Orleans are made of wood, so the casket itself is simply discarded and then later burned. As for the remains that casket had contained, they would be swept to the rear of the vault. Then we would introduce our new loved one, brick and stucco the vault so it is resealed, and then replace the plaque. I'd like to tell you a little bit about All Saints' Day here in New Orleans. It's not quite as widely observed as it was at one time, but this was a day when people would come and spend time with the dead. In the 19th century, it was very competitive. People wanted to brag. I went to every cemetery in the city on All Saints' Day. What did you do? It almost rivaled Mardi Gras in terms of people in the streets crossing and visiting as many of the dead as they could on that day. There would be priests here for counsel. There would be nuns taking offerings for orphans and other charitable purposes. People would even come and bring food and visit with each other on All Saints' Day. Today we still observe it mostly in terms of people coming and leaving flowers and other items indicating that they've been here. Right now we are standing in front of the tomb of Marie Laveau, known as the Voodoo Queen of New Orleans. This is one of the top 3 most visited tombs in the United States of America, the other 2 being John F. Kennedy and Elvis Presley. Okay, why are all these items around the tomb? These are offerings. They've been left by people who have found a connection with Marie Laveau. Some of these are for wishes already granted. Some are for wishes that they hope will be granted in the future. Different things have different meaning to different people. You know, I've been asked about the X's on this tomb. Everyone is aware of them. But what a lot of people don't realize is that these are simply desecration, no more and no less. You see, one time there was a rumor that if you wanted to make a wish of Marie Laveau, you would mark her tomb with 3 X's. Then you would turn around 3 times. Then you would knock on the tomb. You'd holler at her. You'd make a wish. And when it is granted, you come back and circle those X's. And I am in this cemetery almost every day, so I can vouch for the fact that those X's and that circle appeared at the same time, so that hardly counts. If you want to make a wish of Marie Laveau, I'm here to tell you she has never once let me down. I've never done anything other than this. Simply place your hand on her tomb. Make your wish. When she grants it, or it comes to you perhaps in a dream with the knowledge you need to get what you want, come back to New Orleans and leave her an offering. It is that simple. The ghost of Marie Laveau, does she wander the cemetery? There are those who claim they have seen the ghost of Marie Laveau wandering through this cemetery at night. Some have reported seeing her doing rituals here in the cemetery. Still others have said they've seen her wander from the cemetery, winding her way back to her old home on St. Anne Street. Is it so? We don't know. You can decide for yourselves. But here's something that did happen on one of our tours a number of years ago. One lady on the cemetery tour took a photograph at the tomb of Marie Laveau and actually captured an apparition on that film. Now again, is that Marie Laveau? You decide. Josie Arlington was born Mary Dubler to German parents here in New Orleans in 1864. She led a very tumultuous life. By the time she was in her late teens, she was the mistress of a sporting man whose last name was Lebrano, also known as Schwartz. Safe to say he had a few aliases and was not necessarily on the up and up. And before long, she followed suit, worked under a number of aliases herself. She was a scrapper, a street fighter. She was irascible. She had a temper, and you didn't want to cross paths with her in the wrong way. She had a fight with another prostitute named Beulah. When this fight was over, Josie had lost most of her hair. Beulah came off a little worse, though, having lost part of her lower lip and part of one of her ears. She became a little more respectable, changed her ways a little bit, decided good manners might serve her in good stead, opened the most elaborate, elegant house in Storyville, advertising only amiable foreign girls who will only be at home for the very best gentlemen. Josie Arlington tried to make her way up through the ranks of New Orleans society, but money can't buy everything. She was still at the heart of it all a madam, so by most accounts, she was still shunned by the upper echelons of society. Even though she had built a beautiful home up on Esplanade Avenue, she had her niece educated at a convent school, but still it just wasn't enough. How did Josie Arlington finally get revenge on all those who had shunned her? I guess you could really make a point that revenge is a dish best served cold. Josie built a beautiful pink granite tomb in Metairie Cemetery, home of the rich and well-connected in society, and there was nothing they could do to stop her. There are those who say that Josie's tomb was haunted, almost as though that upper echelon was getting their revenge back on her in the afterlife. It was a pink tomb. At one time, where that Pontchartrain Highway now stands was the New Basin Canal. And there was a road next to that canal called the New Basin Shell Road. And there was a light, a toll light. And guess what? It reflected right onto that tomb that made it look as though it was indeed coming from a red light district. Eventually, the road was closed when the canal was filled in, and suddenly that haunting stopped.
What I did was a lot of research about the Holt Cemetery. I was really curious about it. It's a place I've been going to, I've been drawn to over many years since I've lived in New Orleans. What got my attention about it was not only its in-ground burials, but it's got the first crematorium in the city of New Orleans. It was founded by Dr. Joseph Holt in an attempt to keep down the yellow fever epidemics in the city. It was a place where the poor could be buried immediately as opposed to being left laying on the streets to disintegrate. I've been doing a lot of research with people who have relatives buried in there, and all of them have some explanation as to what kind of activity goes on. There's nothing I've found specific to one particular grave or another, but all of them believe it's because whereas the above ground cemeteries use multiple burials, but it's supposed to be that way. They're recycled, they're not really on top of one another. This is in-ground burial where you have your grandmother 6 feet down and your grandfather 3 feet down and your children right up near the surface of the ground. Oftentimes when it rains, the coffins rot, body parts come out of the ground. I've seen entire hands and skulls coming out of the ground. I've seen arms and fingers, and bones are just basically plowed up when they cut the grass and things like that. So the people I've spoken to whose family are buried in there because they can't afford a real cemetery burial like the St. Louis No. 1 or the St. Roch Cemetery, they believe their spirits are at rest because their bones are hanging out all over the ground. So a couple of friends and I got together. We brought our video cameras and our tape recorders and just regular cameras to see if we can catch anything. The moon was just outrageously red for no apparent reason, and we could see people's shadows moving all around the tree as if they were circling us. It was really bizarre. So we took a lot of pictures, and that's where we got the heaviest ectoplasm and the most orbs. Orbs don't mean a whole lot to many people, but of course it can be explained away easily. But these were very unusual in that they had color, they were half orbs. Some of them appeared to have faces in them, and they were just extremely bright. Ectoplasm is believed to be a forming of spirits. Usually it's moisture or something being pulled together by a spirit or an entity. It comes up on film, and what it looks like is smoke or fog or mist. We're not sure exactly what causes it, but the general belief is that a spirit is trying to form into something recognizable to a person. Usually because it's colder there, the condensation pulls to that area, and so it makes a shape.
Many people don't realize that the cemeteries are full of restless spirits that can actually attach themselves to people. Oftentimes these spirits will attach temporarily and eventually go back to where they came from. But sometimes people unwittingly walk into a situation where a spirit from either this lifetime or perhaps another actually attaches to them and goes home with them. I recently had a call from a gentleman who had a very unique experience in one of our cemeteries. He was wandering around taking photographs, as people love to do here in New Orleans, and he stumbled across a tomb that was very intriguing to him. It was the tomb of a young boy, and it said nothing on it but, "Mother, I'm going to play." Fascinated by the inscription on the tomb, he moved in for a closer look. He touched the tomb. Little did he know the series of events that would take place over the next 20 years. He finally called me and told me that this ghost had been haunting him all this time, and he wanted to find out how the boy died. There was very little information about the tomb, but I was able to trace down a death record. And when I brought it to him, not only was he shocked to see that the boy did indeed drown, but he was even more horrified to see that the address for the young child was several doors down from his Governor Nichols home, a house that he grew up in himself, a family home, and he lived there until he was 10 years old, the exact age that the boy was when he drowned. The ghost still haunts him today, and to this day, no one can figure out why.
Now, if people go to a cemetery, depending on what kind of work they're doing, they'll mostly take skulls, or they'll mostly, use bones for different, concoctions or portions. But for the most part, most voodoo people, they don't go themselves to do that kind of activity, but they have people who are grave robbers who they, may cater to get certain things that they need. if and when they need. But for the most part, the cemetery is sacred, and you don't go there to grave rob or disturb the dead. You kind of stay away from that kind of activity.
When I first started with the tour company, I started out as tour security. I walked along with the tour to make sure that no drunk miscreants would harass the group. And I never really bought into the whole ghost legends and lore. I didn't believe in ghosts. I've never seen one. And walking through the cemetery and the cemetery tours, we used to see bones. And it was the craziest thing. I'm born and raised here all my life, and I never realized there were actual bones just hanging out in the cemetery. And I thought it was the coolest thing to pick one up and take it home. Hey, check it out, I got a human bone. And I guess I was a young kid and really didn't realize or respect what I was doing. And it wasn't 24 hours after I took that bone home, I started believing in the supernatural. On one occasion, I think about 2 days after I picked up the bone, I woke up and I saw a blob on the ceiling moving around. And yeah, sometimes you wake up and you kind of got to adjust your eyes for a second, and it didn't happen that way. I mean, I looked at this thing and stared at it for about 10 seconds and saw an apparition moving across the ceiling and then slowly disappear into the ceiling. And I was speechless. I mean, I immediately picked up the phone and called Khalil. I think it was like 2 o'clock in the morning, and she yelled at me. But I was scared to death. Well, she told me to immediately bring that bone back to the cemetery and put it back where it was, and to apologize to the spirit that I had taken it from. Again, I always thought this was kind of a ridiculous thing, but I did exactly what she said to do, because there's no question. There is no question that I saw what I saw.
Thanks for joining us for this week's look at the cities of the dead. Join us next time as we delve into the mystery and magic of voodoo, the most feared and misunderstood religion in the world. That's next time on Haunted New Orleans.